Major spoilers of the Penguin are going to be included from the off, so you've been warned. If you thought there were going to be any redeeming qualities in Oswald Cobb in the season finale of the Penguin, then you were deeply mistaken. This finale has done anything but redeem the character. It's actually made him even more hateable than what he was in the first Batman movie, and that's what's absolutely incredible about the show. Just when you thought things had the potential of changing, the show just doubled down on the fact that Oswald Cobb was a selfish monster at his core. And honestly, we've not seen a character like that on TV in such a long time. This finale brought the epic 8-episode series to a close, and that final shot, yeah, I know, vengeance is coming. With Frances getting the opposite of the very thing that she wanted, but Oswald getting what he did. Let's dive into the episode and break down all that there was to take away from the finale. So let's get into it. Here is the Penguin Episode 8 ending explained. Why did Oz kill Victor? This was genuinely a heartbreaking moment in the show. Victor had quite literally saved Oz's life several times throughout the series, and without Vic, Oz would have been toast. But during their final scene together, what the show led us to believe was that a sentimental, happy ending for the pair was on the horizon. They once looked out at the city with milkshakes in episode 1, and now it was whiskey. Vic was a man, and it felt like there was a respect for him that Oz didn't have before. However, this scene turned into a haunting, sinister one in the blink of an eye. Victor referred to Oz as his family after thanking him for taking a chance on him instead of killing him back in episode 1. But that was the very thing that caused Vic's downfall. Oz had just achieved everything that he'd ever dreamed of, in the sense that Sofia went behind bars and he was now in control of the city. Vic even picked him up at his lowest point when his mother suffered the stroke, and he gave him the pep talk that he needed to get Sofia where he wanted her. However, with Vic considering Oz as family, Oz knew that it was something that would ultimately get in the way of his progression and impact him holding on to being on top. Oz said how family was the very thing that can give an individual drive and a reason to carry on, but at the same time, it can be a weakness and cause an individual to become weaker because of emotions that end up getting in the way. Oz couldn't allow Victor to carry on because of the emotions and feelings that would ultimately come between them, as Oz also started to view Victor in a similar way. But also, at the same time, Oz didn't need him anymore. This resulted in Oz strangling him to the point where he died. When Victor was saying, "Please, please," and begging for his life, it was really hard to listen to, and it was such a sad moment, as Victor came to trust Oz. The fact that Oz took what money Vic had out of his wallet and then took his driver's license and threw it into the water so that he couldn't be identified, it was something that was also quite sad. Oz knew that Vic came from the East Side, a place where people got forgotten about. And with Vic's identification being thrown into the river, Vic would just ultimately become another unidentified dead person that Gotham had chewed up and spat out in recent times. It was really sad. The fact that it occurred off the back of a conversation where you thought that the both of them were going to be developing and discussing next steps. The complete change in mood and actions caught me off guard, and it made it all the more powerful. The twist in this episode of Oz's rise to power pretty much stemmed from the fact that deputies were overlooked and they rose to the top by overthrowing those that didn't appreciate them. As we saw throughout all of the Triad members, Oz was once a deputy that had now made it, but Victor didn't overthrow his superior. Emotions got in the way of Oz and Victor, and after seeing what could happen with his mother, and us actually seeing that the only person Oz truly cares about is himself, he didn't want anything to stand in his way as a weakness, even Victor. Oz betrayed his mother in the end. The backdrop of the opening scene having a connection to where Oz found out that his mother knew about him killing his brothers was poetic. Within the flashback, we saw it emphasized that Oz was planning on taking care of his mother in the future and that he'd get her the penthouse that he always promised her. With Oz taking down Sofia by working with the city council member Sebastian Haydee and getting the explosion and all of the deaths pinned on her, and also the Bliss operation pinned on Sal Maroni, he now had the freedom to be able to take the city and be the top dog that he wanted. When he found out that his mother was in a vegetative state and could no longer communicate with him, we saw that he basically begged and sobbed to her as he wanted her to say that she was proud of him, something that she'd never be able to do. The poetic thing about this situation is the fact that the last thing that she ever said to him was how much she hated him and that she wished that she let Rex kill him like she planned on doing when he was younger. Those were his mother's final words to him, the person that he apparently loved more than anything and anybody in this world and wanted approval and praise from. She despised him and now wanted him dead. Oz kept his mother alive in the vegetative state, looking out of the penthouse window, believing that that was the very thing that she wanted. However, when we go back a couple of episodes, Frances pleaded with Oz and told him that if she were to ever end up in a situation where she couldn't do things for herself and lost her mind, then she would want him to kill her. But what's he doing? The complete opposite, leaving her bedbound, unable to speak, move, or do anything for herself. Because he can't let her go. Because just like when he was younger, she's the most important person and he'd do anything for it to just be her and him. The single tear that went down her cheek in the final scene was that of somebody that no longer wanted to be there. However, she was stuck in the prison and shell that was now her body. Frances called her son the devil, and now she was stuck in hell. Sofia's acceptance and her demise. Cristin Milioti, take a bow. Within this episode, we saw the best performance of Sofia Giganti. What was quite beautiful about the character in this episode was that she truly saw Oz for the monster that he was. She openly stated that she never saw Oz like that in the past, but how his mother always did, and she was genuinely shocked when he was prepared to let his mother lose her finger because he couldn't admit to her that he was responsible for his brother's deaths. Sofia found peace in this episode as she was planning on leaving her family estate and getting out of the business for good. She didn't want any part in mirroring her father's life. All she wanted to do was to get revenge on Oz for killing the one person that mattered most to her, her brother Alberto. The burning of the family home was symbolic because it was marking an end to the hold that her father had over her life, even post his death. During her demise, when the tables turned and Mr. Zhao was killed along with everybody else at the airport hangar, you could see the genuine fear that was in Sofia's eyes. It was so convincing, and you know what? I actually felt for the character in that moment. Only because things were about to change for her completely. Oz and her went for a final drive, which was poetic because that was obviously how their relationship once was. He was her driver and he had the hopes and dreams of one day being on top, and there he was, about to ascend the position that he always dreamed of. We were led to believe that Sofia was going to be killed by Oz, and we saw that she accepted her fate with the deep breath that she took in. But Oz had his plan with Sebastian, which was actually taking place instead. This wound her back up in Arkham, a fate for her that was even worse than death. She hated her time in Arkham before, and she even had nightmares when she was out of there, but in her dream, she was back. So Oz knew full well that her being behind those walls for the rest of her life, suffering and knowing that he was the person that sent her there, it would be something that would drive her crazier than she already was, and it was a fate that would make her wish death upon herself as quickly as possible. The last thing that we saw of Sofia, she was inside of her cell and Dr. Julian walked in with some letters. Sofia received a letter from an individual called Selena Kyle who was claiming to be her half-sister. We obviously know that this is true as she was in the Batman movie as Catwoman, so I'm presuming Sofia's influence might be involved in the second movie when that gets released, as there's a clear point of contact there now. The ending. The final thing that we saw in the episode was Oz in his penthouse loving the fact that he was on top of the world, quite literally. Eve was dressed up in his mother's outfit with her eyeshadow on, and he was telling Oz just how proud she was of him, as if she was his mother, because that was the very thing that he wanted to hear at that moment, and obviously the real Frances wasn't able to. What was interesting about this scene was that Eve obviously told Sofia of the location where Oz was at because she was angry with him. This was because he knew that it was Carmine that killed the women that Eve was close with, but he never said anything to her. Eve being alongside him kind of just painted the backdrop that you just can't trust anybody in that world, and that secrets are what essentially keep you safe, but they can also get you killed. Right now, it's in her best interest to trust Oz and to cozy up to him. And to be honest, there's no way that he'll find out that she grassed him up to Sofia because she's within the walls of Arkham. The last thing that we saw in the entirety of the series was the bat signal being lit up in the sky, which to me is just a homage that the second Batman movie is the next thing that will be following on from this, and that he's going to be out there. My review of the finale. This finale was just incredible. There's no two ways about it. I expected nothing less as well because this first season of the show has just been faultless in every meaning of the word. The story was at a point where it was reaching its crescendo, and having Oz's mother on the line was the perfect stake for him to have. Us discovering that Oz was a complete and utter monster right down to his bones was an avenue that I didn't think would be going down. I thought there would be some slight redemption with the character, as that's what you usually get with main characters in a show, but the writers doubled down on just how evil he was, and it took me by surprise in such a good way. Colin Farell absolutely delivered in his performance as the Penguin. I don't think there's anybody out there that would do a better job than him. He injected his own characteristics and personality traits into Oz, and it just allowed the character to feel human and real. Within this episode, there were some really gorgeous moments and decisions that were made in the way that the episode was shot. For example, the seamless camera movement of Vic getting out of the car and witnessing the devastation at Crown Point. It was something that was really immersive, and we saw it as he did, so it added to the experience. I'd also say the scene within the theatre where Francis stabbed Oz, and then it changing to Oz when he was younger and calling for his mother. It was a stylistic choice that just elevated the moment and made it all the more memorable. This is most definitely one of the best shows of the year, and HBO have done it again. They rarely ever fail, and I'm really impressed with this one. The show made me like a villain, and then right at the end, they reminded me why it was that villains are villains. Because they're evil and think of nobody but themselves. The Penguin is a show that'll live long in the memory, and if you've not watched it, then I would 100% recommend it. So, there you have it, The Penguin Episode 8, Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on The Penguin, then click on the card in the top corner. I've broken down the season, so there's an entire playlist there. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of the finale? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.